Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 122. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be taking an Encore. And I know what you're thinking, how could it be possible that we're taking the Encore if we haven't finished the 128 teams challenge yet, even though we're 5 months after where the 128 teams challenge sort of theoretically ended? Well, first off, we're not done with it, even though we're 5 months past where the original 128 teams challenge should have ended. But we're going to be using the move Encore in a quite numerous variety of ways, as in using it into the opponent in order to make them use a move over and over again, or to use it into ourselves to make us use a move again immediately. And in case anybody needs a refresher on what the move Encore does, is that you use it into the opponent as a status move, and then you will be forced to repeat the last move that you used for the next 3 turns. So it's very effective whenever you have a Pokemon with the Prankster ability, like we have Grafaiai here with Prankster, where we get priority on our status moves. We can force an opponent to use a move over and over again that seemed good at the time, like Protect, in order to save themselves for a turn, but when you lock them into using a move that doesn't do any damage, it's very beneficial for us to do damage into them with our moves. But there's also another strategy that we can do specifically with Prankster Encore users, where we could have disable. Actually, do we have disable on Grafaiai? Just out of curiosity, we do not have disable on Grafaiai. So you can Encore disable lock is something that we've already had, and at least worth bringing up. But you can Encore disable lock Pokemon into being forced to struggle or switch out. But there's even another strategy that we actually use on this team where we can side Encore into a Pokemon with a priority move, and instead of using the priority move, they will use the move that they last used, but their priority bracket will not change, so they will use the move that they last used as a priority move instead of their selected priority move. So it's a little bit crazy, but we'll have some battles later on where we showcase this actually happening and the strangeness that happens because of it. But also on our Grafaiai, we are going to be using the Prankster Parting Shot in order to lower the attack and special attack of the opponent so that we can get some pivoting with Grafaiai, but also to make it so that the opponent is a little bit weaker. And we have the Scary Face for our speed control, since none of our Pokemon are super fast except for Grafaiai and Dugtrio, but those are kind of designed to just get off their Prankster or their fast damage really quick and then leave the field so that we can have our heavier hitters take up the space. And then we also have the Super Fang on Grafaiai, just so Grafaiai can contribute some chip damage into the opponent, and 50% chip damage on anything is pretty good. As well as we're going to be using the Cobra Cloak on Grafaiai, just so that we're not feeling any secondary effects. And we're Terra Dark so that we can dodge other pranksters who might want to prankster taunt us. Next up, we're going to be using Ursaluna Blood Moon, and that's because Ursaluna Blood Moon has a very strong has a very strong move in the Blood Moon, which is a 140 base attack that cannot be selected the turn after it's used. However, if we Encore into ourselves, then we can use Blood Moon twice in a row, and if we use Vacuum Wave, which is a priority move, whenever we are going for the Blood Moon, then we get a priority Blood Moon, which is a lot of damage. And of course, we also have the Earth Power for our ground stab, but we're Life Orb and Terra Normal just so that we are getting off as much Blood Moon damage into the opponent as we can. And then Mind's Eye, of course, means that we can hit ghost types with our Blood Moon and our Vacuum Wave if we ever actually need to use the Vacuum Wave for something. Next, we have Annihilate, and Annihilate is doing very similar things to the Ursaluna Blood Moon, where we have our big damage move in the Rage Fist that we can generate, which we can side hit in some ways, as we do have the Vacuum Wave that will be able to hit Annihilate because of the Mind's Eye, so we can make a 100 base power Rage Fist that way, or Dragonite also has a priority move that we can hit into Annihilate to activate it that way too. The Annihilate also has Stab in the close combat, and then of course the Vacuum Wave to serve as our priority move that we can Encore ourselves into to have a priority Rage Fist or a priority close combat depending on what we last used. And then we also have the Lash Out on the Annihilate, and that is just so that we can have a better matchup into Trick Room, where we can Scary Face with Grafai into Annihilate, and then Annihilate gets a 150 base power Lash Out because we had a stat drop lowered on the turn, and then, clicks it into maybe a Pokemon trying to set up Trick Room, or a Pokemon redirecting for a Pokemon trying to set up Trick Room. And then since Grafai and Annihilate, we Scary Face again, and then that gives Annihilate another speed drop, and then Annihilate's at -4 speed, and it gets another 150 base power Lash Out. Pretty good, theoretically at least. But then also on Annihilate, we of course have the Defiant ability just so that we can get a +2 in attack whenever we get a stat lowered. Very, very handy. And we're Assault Vest because all of our attacks are actually attacks that do damage, so Assault Vest is pretty handy for taking special hits. And I just decided to put on Terra Dark just to combo with the Lash Out, but Dark isn't a super ideal Terra type for Annihilate because you're still weak to Fairy, so just take note of that. Here we got Ditto, and I mostly just put Ditto on here because with Grafai clicking Encore into the opponent, it's kind of nice that if you Encore lock a Pokemon that's like a Fire type or a Water type or a Grass type into using a Fire, Water, Grass type moves, you can bring in Ditto on that Pokemon then, and then Ditto will resist that move naturally because everything resists itself pretty much except for like Ghost and Dragon and who are super effective against themselves. Those are the only ones that you wouldn't really want to switch Ditto onto. But we have a Ghost and a Dragon to deal with other Ghosts and Dragons and theoretically win the war. But just in case Ditto is going to take an attack that is a little bit too much for its little HP to handle, we have the Focus Sash so that we can guaranteed always take at least one hit on our Ditto. And we're Steel Terra just because Steel is the best defense Terra that is out there. Here towards the end, we've got Dragonite, and Dragonite is a different way that we were using the Encore, in that for Ursaluna and Annihilate, we were using the priority Encore in order to make it so that we had really strong priority damage moves, and here we are using the Encore on Dragonite in order to make it so that we have a priority force switching move in the fact that we have the Dragon Tail. So if we can use Dragon Tail into the opponent to make them switch into a different Pokemon, we can have a really interesting niche scenario where we use Grafai to Encore into Dragonite, and then we have Dragonite select Aqua Jet, but since Grafai is going to Encore into Dragonite first, Dragonite will immediately go for the Dragon Tail, which means that we can force the opponent to not even have a move on a Pokemon and switch them out, which is just super funny and super... It basically never comes up as being useful. There's no way that this ever comes up as being useful ever in your life, but it's really funny. And then for Dragonite, we also have the Stomping Tantrum that I mostly wanted to use to try and hit the Steel types that Dragonite can hit with Dragon Tail or Aqua Jet super well. We can click Stomping Tantrum into them, or if we miss the Dragon Tail on either of the Dragon Tails that we try to force the opponent to switch out, then we get a 150 base power Stomping Tantrum. And then we also have the Roost that we can heal to try and stall the opponent for a bit for whatever reason, if we're waiting for their damage to decrease, whether it be a weather or something like, or if we expect the opponent to attack into us and we just want to maintain being at full health but they don't attack into us, then Roost will fail and we'll get the double damage Stomping Tantrum that way instead. And I wasn't quite sure what ability I wanted on this Dragonite. Obviously, you don't want to get faked out if you're trying to go for the side Encore into a Pokemon, because getting faked out on Dragonite just immediately means that you are wasting a turn. And we are an attacker, so we don't want our attack to be lowered by Intimidate. But because we have the Roost, I could also see the multi-scale here. It's just I think the Inner Focus is better for the Encore strategy, so I decided to go with that. And we also have the Citrus Berry, just so Dragonite has a little bit of extra health for whenever it's trying to cycle out an opponent with the Dragon Tail. It'll have some extra health as long as it lives one attack. And we are the Terra Ground on Dragonite, even though Ground is still weak to Ice, which makes it not the best Terra type for Dragonite. It combines with our Stomping Tantrum, so... And lastly on the team, I decided to include Alolan Dugtrio because we have the Stealth Rock for whenever we're trying to do the cycling with Encore, because usually Pokemon don't like being Encored into Protect, so that forces them to switch out, which means that we can build up Stealth Rock damage over time that way, but also using Dragonite's Dragon Tail, we can force the opponent to switch out and build up even more Stealth Rock damage that way too. And then as for our other moves, we have the Iron Head and the Stomping Tantrum for our two major stab damages that we can use into the opponent, and we have the Bulldoze that we can use to lower the speed of the opponent, or we can use it to not only give Annihilate a Rage Fist stack, but also as though that it gets a stat drop and can go for the double damage Lash Out. And with the Alolan Dugtrio, if any Pokemon makes contact with the Alolan Dugtrio, it will activate the Tangling Hair, which means that it will have their speed lowered by 1 stage. And we're Clear Amulet just so that we're not getting intimidated or speed dropped by any random things. And we're Terra Ghost just in case we need to avoid a Fake Out, but you really don't want to be tearing Dugtrio that often. So yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so this first battle here is against a Hisuian Typhlosion team where they have a half-fairy team with the Clefairy, Primarina, and the Whimsicott, which means that our dragon is not going to be very useful here. But a lot of offense with Whimsicott being able to set the Tailwind does put us at a bit of a disadvantage here, as their speed control is better than our speed control on Grafaiai. So we lead with Dugtrio and Annihilate here as they lead Primarina, Whimsicott, and Whimsicott immediately goes for the Tailwind to get the speed control, but Dugtrio is so fast that it gets off the Iron Head hit and Primarina flinches, which is pretty nice. I was kind of hoping that they would attack into Annihilate there so that we could get the Rage Fist stack, and it looks like with the double Rage Fist we would have just gotten rid of Primarina there. But I'm not one to really turn down a flinch. Moonblast comes down to Annihilate. Annihilate takes it okay. Does get a special attack drop, but that means that we get an attack buff because of our Defiant. And Hyper Voice immediately just removes Dugtrio from the field after Dugtrio gets up the rocks. And Rage Fist is going to take out the Primarina guaranteed there. Typhlosion comes in, takes some rock damage, and it does frisk our items as we bring in the Grafaiai here, and we have the setup for the strategy, which is that we watch Whimsicott click Sunny Day because it's the faster prankster, but Grafaiai side encores into Annihilate, and Annihilate went for Vacuum Wave, but because we previously used Rage Fist, we encore ourselves into Rage Fist, which means that we have a priority Rage Fist that we can use faster than the Tailwinded Typhlosion. So unfortunately, the Rage Fist does go into Whimsicott. If it went into Typhlosion, I think the game was just kind of over from here. But we take out Whimsicott with the Rage Fist, and Eruption does come out, and it gets rid of Grafaiai, and Annihilate barely hangs on because of the Assault Vest. But Dragonite is revealed to be our last Pokemon in Typhlosion. Protects here as Clefairy goes for the Speed Drop to Speed Drop both Dragonite and Annihilate, but Rage Fist just comes out into Clefairy, and Dragonite Roost there trying to stall out not only the Tailwind but also the Sun. Typhlosion here decides to just go for the Terrifier and Heat Waves into Annihilate, and Dragonite is still roosting in order to try and stall out the Sun. Eruption is doing a little bit more than half, but with the Citrus Berry and our Roost we can get back up to full HP, and we have enough Roost to maybe even try and stall out every single Eruption here, but because of the Sun, it's doing a little bit more, but now the Sun has ended, and so the Eruption only does about 39% to Dragonite, and we can just safely Stomping Tantrum into the Hisuian Zoroark there in order to take it out. So that is the part that I forgot to mention, is that whenever you encore yourself into one of these priority moves that you previously used, you don't actually get to pick which target, despite the fact that I had Vacuum Waved into the Typhlosion there, I believe. It actually ended up Rage Fisting into the Whimsicott slot. So it is a bit of a gamble, but sometimes a gamble is necessary whenever you are trying to fight a team. You get a really good gamble, then you get out of the game immediately. Alright, here we have a game where it's pretty immediately difficult to try and go with our Prankster strategy because they have the Serena and all the moves that we want to use into Pelipper in order to get rid of its Focus Sash with a priority move, we can't use whenever Serena is on the field, so Serena is a pretty big threat to our team. So here we lead Grafaiai and Blood Moon Ursaluna into Palafin and Pelipper. And here they decide to swap in Sabrina as we go Terra Normal Ursaluna. And here I was okay with either getting the Parting Shot into the Palafin so that we could lower its attack and special attack, and then maybe try and take a hit with Ursaluna, and then getting an attack off with Ursaluna
but because they swapped out Palafin, which makes the most sense because they want their Palafin form for later, they were able to block our priority, but it also means that they won't be able to KO Ursaluna because Weather Ball only does that much. And we Blood Moon into Pelipper, which brings it down to the Sash, which is pretty important. We swap in Ditto here in order to copy the Grass typing, and we Super Fang Serena for half of its health. Power Whips into Ditto, who is a Grass type, and Weather Ball crit is going to take out Grafaiai, unfortunately, but now we can bring in Ursaluna, who is going to protect, and we Triple Axel to try and get rid of Serena, winning the speed tie there, as Pelipper goes for the Weather Ball to try and get rid of Ursaluna, but it doesn't connect into the protect. Now Palafin comes in, but because we copied their Ditto, we have Queenly Majesty, so they cannot go for the Jet Punch into our Ursaluna to pick us off, so we kind of flip their strategy on them, where now we can Vacuum Wave into Pelipper in order to take that out safely, and it looks like their Serena was faster than their Palafin because we got off the Power Whip before the Palafin got a chance to move there. We Vacuum Wave into King Gambit just to get that quad damage, and we taunt the King Gambit there so that it doesn't Swords Dance. Does Iron Head into Ditto, but Ditto is able to take it, and we reveal our Dragonite in the back. That King Gambit goes for the Terra Ghost here, which it kind of benefited it to do it last turn, but not super much. Like, there's not much that really would have changed in the game if King Gambit had Terra Ghosted last turn, but we got the job done. And lastly, we have a battle against a Dondozo Tatsugiri team where they have the Scarf Annihilate in order to click Final Gambit into something and take it out, or to go for the coaching into like Dragonair and King Gambit, who are physical attackers, in order to boost their damage, or they can have Clefable for the Unaware redirection, which is also a tad bit scary. But we see they start with Annihilate and King Gambit here as we bring in Grafaiai and Dragonite, and they immediately coaching into King Gambit here, but we Super Fang King Gambit, get some good damage. Iron Head comes down to Dragonite, but Dragonite is inner focus, so it doesn't have a chance to flinch, and we get to eat our Citrus Berry to restore some of our health, and we get to Dragon Tail out King Gambit there, so it loses the stat drop, and we get in Tatsugiri, which they don't want damage to happen to Tatsugiri. But while Tatsugiri is switching out, I believe Annihilate wanted to go for the coaching here into Dondozo so that they can swap in Tatsugiri on the next turn in order to start getting off a lot of attacks. But we did the Encore into Dragonite to make it so that Dragonite has a priority Dragon Tail since we used Dragon Tail on the previous turn, and it Dragon Tailed into the Annihilate. So Annihilate did not get to move on this turn, and King Gambit is brought to the field. Dondozo goes for the Protect here as they try and sucker to take out Dragonite as we Super Fang into Dozo, but we Dragon Tail into King Gambit, but that brings in Tatsugiri, but now they're locked into the Dondozo Tatsugiri mode, and because they previously protected in order to save Dondozo from the Super Fang, now we can just Encore them into Protect for quite a while, as we'll see here. But the whole purpose of the next few turns is to use Grafaiai's Super Fang to chip down the Dondozo. I believe we even go for Roost here, and we use Ditto to copy their Dondozo, which they're both unaware, so they're both unaware of each other's boost, but we can use Ditto to chip down Dondozo in combination with Grafaiai's Super Fang after we roosted to get some health back on Dragonite, and you can see how much the order up is doing. We just need to keep taunting the Dondozo for quite a while into just continuously protecting and hoping that there's not too many double protects, because double protects end up really wasting our turns. And this Dondozo is PP maxed on its protects, so we need to sort of defeat it before it gets to the end of the protects, because you can't Encore a move that doesn't have any PP anymore. So we're just playing these turns out for quite a while here. Ditto also only has 5 of each move, so we need Ditto to swap out whenever it runs out of the Order Ups, because Order Up is the best move that we can use into Dondozo, and we can't Earthquake because Grafaiai is obviously here. We'd have to swap in Dragonite to Earthquake, but I think they get the double protect right there, or maybe that was... There's the double protect that happens, but we're trying to Super Fang Dondozo, but Dondozo is sticking around, refusing to go. Here we swap out into Dragonite so that we can reset the number of moves that Ditto has for whenever it comes back in, and we're still encoring the Dondozo, trying to make sure that it just cannot do a single thing here while we have Ditto with as many PPs on its moves as we can get on it. we're beginning to run out. Dondozo is on its last protect now, and there uses its last one. So we Super Fang, and we order up, and that nearly kills it. But here on this next turn, should have realized that Dondozo was out of protects because we tried to Encore it, but it doesn't work. Whereas if we had Scary Faced it there, and then if Ditto had taken it out with the order up, which would have done enough damage to take it out, then we could have taken out the Dondozo at the cost of not losing our Grafaiai, but we lose our Grafaiai to the Earthquake as Ditto is able to order up to take out Dondozo. And now it is a 3v3 as they bring in King Gambit. We Vacuum Wave King Gambit to try and get rid of it, but they Terra Dark and they Sucker Punch there to try and get rid of Dondozo. Dondozo does appear to be faster than Tatsugiri though, and gets off the Earthquake, which is able to take out King Gambit and do some pretty big damage to the Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri goes for the Draco, and that is able to take out the Ditto despite our special defense boost, but at the cost of Tatsugiri's special attack. And now with Dragonite in the back, we Aqua Jet the Annihilate so that it has less health for the final Gambit, which means that Dragonite lives, which means that Dragonite and Annihilate take spread Muddy Water damage here from the Tatsugiri. And Tatsugiri, in order to win this, would need to accuracy drop us into Oblivion and make sure that we can never hit it. But because we land this next Rage Fist here with only 75% accuracy, we are able to win the game. And that was a long one for VGC. You usually don't see him go to 21 turns, but we were taking an encore there, I guess you could say. We just kept on going and going and going. So yeah, that was the Taking an Encore team, and obviously the main purpose of this team is just to make you aware of the strange mechanics that revolve around using the move Encore, and how the mechanics are pretty different from Speed Control, as usually when you use Speed Control, it instant updates. Since like Generation 7, Speed Control is consistently updated so that whenever you lower the speed of an opposing Pokemon, they'll be slower for the turn. But Encore works differently, as whenever you update priority brackets, they don't update for the turn, so it's a little weird. It's quirky. It comes up every once in a while in a format with a Prankster Encore user, and it's just generally good to keep in mind. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing, because both of those things help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.